Morning, everybody. My name is Edward Josephson. I'm the Director of Litigation at Legal Services NYC. And I'd like to welcome Mayor de Blasio, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, Borough President Eric Adams, and all our distinguished guests to Brooklyn Legal Services for a discussion of a problem that has long been foremost in our minds at Legal Services: harassment and the displacement of tenants from our city's neighborhoods. Advocates at Legal Services NYC have fought against landlord harassment for decades. When I started here 25 years ago, we were focused on gentrification and displacement in neighborhoods like Park Slope, but we have now seen the problem metastasize to virtually every neighborhood in Brooklyn, from Bushwick to East New York to Flatbush and Crown Heights. With the ever more feverish real estate market, tenant displacement is like a tsunami that is sweeping over our city. And so we are extremely grateful and happy to have the support and collaboration of so many of our friends at every level of government. And it's great to hear that we will be working together ever more closely and in coordination in the years to come. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, who has mobilized the resources of his office to focus in a new way on problems of tenant displacement and harassment. Mr. Attorney General, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your all being here. It is good to be here with some of my great colleagues in government, the mayor and borough president, of course, and Commissioner Darrell Towns, a crucial partner at the state level, and I'm joined by some folks from my office, Special Counsel Jessica Addy and Special Counsel John Spagna, who work on these matters. We are here today to announce the formation of an unprecedented tenant harassment prevention task force. It is a partnership of city and state agencies, very simply designed to investigate, sue, and when appropriate, prosecute abusive landlords to stop the harassment of tenants. This task force could not come at a better time, and it's important to understand the context for this, which Ed alluded to. In recent months, we've seen a huge increase in complaints regarding landlord harassment. The current real estate boom, ladies and gentlemen, is not like the booms we experienced before. My father grew up in Park Place in Utica in East New York, and when I tell people in the family who left, who's not in New York anymore, that this is hot real estate, they think I'm hallucinating. But the boom is not regular. It is not going down the same way other booms did. This is the landlord-tenant equivalent of climate change. We know the law. When a tenant vacates a rent-regulated apartment, the owner can automatically increase the rent by 20%, can increase the rent by more if they make improvements, and then if the rent gets up to $2,500 per month, the apartment is automatically taken out of the rent regulation system. It is very important to understand that the great majority of landlords and developers in New York play by the rules. There is a dramatic contrast between most of these landlords and a relatively small number of recidivist abusers who this task force is going to target. Some of the purchasers of properties in gentrifying or soon-to-be gentrifying neighborhoods where demand for real estate is highest, create really hostile and dangerous conditions for tenants. And my colleagues will speak about that. Removing boilers during a winter like this, putting people at risk, filing false documents with regulators to make it difficult for us to know what construction we need to oversee and who owns what. And that the health threats, lead, asbestos, fire hazards, and even people who hire thugs to personally harass tenants. We are here today because traditionally, when owners have neglected their buildings, the New York City Department of Buildings and the Department of Housing Preservation and Development have used their enforcement powers to ensure compliance with housing and building codes. But cases involving harassment and rent regulation are handled by state agencies. So this Tenant Harassment Prevention Task Force is going to ensure that the state and city agencies that can have an impact on this work together seamlessly, that we share information in real time, and that we make sure that we are able to bring maximum pressure on any abusive or predatory landlord and prevent them from displacing tenants through their abusive tactics. Let me emphasize that my office, working with our colleagues represented by the great Commissioner Towns, my office does have criminal jurisdiction in this area, and we will not hesitate to bring criminal charges when they are appropriate. So we have, since I've been Attorney General, we have tried to respond, and we've responded aggressively. We have more of a commitment of resources in our office to these problems than ever before in history. And the prejudice we've uncovered, the harassment we have seen, sometimes is very, very hard to believe, but it is very real. And as the market continues to boom, it's only going to grow. So we have had a huge uptick in complaints from tenants in the last year. I think that's reflected in agencies, city agencies and state agencies also receiving more complaints. This is a very simple proposal. We're making sure that everyone who has the power or ability in any way to help stop landlords from abusive tactics to displace tenants, that all of us are working together and putting our full commitment into this project with the understanding that we need information wherever we can get it. We need people to come forward, and if they come forward to one agency, we need to make sure the information is shared with everyone else. We will, by forming this joint project and pursuing it aggressively, we will affect the lives of many thousands of New Yorkers, and I'm really honored to be here with you today. And now it is a tremendous pleasure to introduce the housing mayor of the city of New York, a great advocate and a great mayor, Bill de Blasio.
Well, I want to thank the Attorney General. This is a game changer. To have the top law enforcement official in New York State weighing in on behalf of our tenants, fighting to protect affordable housing. I want to really emphasize what the Attorney General said. He is willing to bring criminal charges to stop the harassment of tenants, to stop tenants from being illegally displaced. That's a game changer, and I want to thank you, Attorney General, for your leadership. I want to thank Ed Josephson and Megan Fox and everyone at South Brooklyn Legal Services, everyone who does such extraordinary work. I've been thanking people as I went around the building today, because these are folks who have kept people in their homes, who have made sure that people are not illegally displaced, who have been the legal thin blue line between people having an apartment they deserve and a family being without a place to live. So their work is crucial, and it's work that my administration is supporting and going to be supporting on an even bigger basis all over the city. But I want to just reflect for one quick second on what Ed said about his work starting out in Park Slope, what Eric said about his family's origins at Eastern Parkway in Utica. So just a personal reflection. I went to NYU for my undergraduate degree, 1982. As part of the urban studies program I was in, I did an internship. I did it with a nonprofit that's still around and doing great work called the Fifth Avenue Committee in Brooklyn. And I did work in Park Slope. And Park Slope in 1982 was a place that was entirely different than today. It was a place with a lot of boarded up buildings and vacant storefronts and vacant lots. And if you were to tell me then about $1 million and $2 million homes and people being forced out by landlords so they could get sky-high rents, I would have told you you were absolutely out of your mind. This phenomenon of gentrification occurred so quickly that I think for all of us, we're still catching up with the impact. I remember vividly Shirlane saying to me the first day she heard about $1 million home being sold in Park Slope, and we were absolutely in disbelief. And it literally seemed like that happened in a course of very few years, from it being a neighborhood that was affordable to a neighborhood that very few people could afford to reach. The reason I say that is we, as a city, have not had the right conversation about gentrification. We haven't sorted out what it means, both positive and negative, the challenges it creates, the things that have to be addressed with public policy. What you're seeing today is an example of finally government focusing and getting it right, and the different levels of government coming together in common cause to address the negatives of gentrification. Because as I said in my State of the City speech, if we don't address the downside of gentrification, it will not be the same city any longer. It will become an exclusive city. It will not be the open city and the inclusive city that we have always been, and that has worked for generations and has been a place that people aspired to live in for generations or to stay in. So that's why today is so important, because it marks another step towards all levels of government coming to grips with this problem and now taking the reins and addressing it energetically. Now, the numbers tell you a lot. We know that in the last decade plus, over 200,000 people, or I should say over 200,000 units, left affordable status. They were Mitchell Lamas, they were in rent regulation, and whatever status they had, they used to be affordable, they're not affordable anymore. We know some of that happened legally. We know some of that happened illegally. We know a lot of that happened illegally could have been and should have been stopped. And this work that we're talking about today is an example of the kind of tools that can actually stop it, that can actually cause the law to be enforced that so often was not enforced in the past. And this could really be part of how we stem the tide. If we stop the illegal harassment and the pushing out of law-abiding tenants, it is a fundamental part of how we change the affordable housing picture in this city. Complaints of harassment of tenants that are coming into our housing court are skyrocketing. We had 752 in fiscal 13. We already have 426 so far this year. So the numbers, even from year to year, are going up rapidly. More and more unscrupulous landlords, unfortunately, are trying to take advantage of the market. I say every time, I know my colleagues feel the same way. Most landlords abide by the law and serve their tenants well. There are a number of unscrupulous landlords that now are in the crosshairs of all of us, because what they're doing is they're forcing people illegally out and leaving those people in a very tough situation. This is especially true in Brooklyn and Manhattan, but it's all 5 boroughs. And it will take a group effort and a sustained effort to address it. I want to thank the members of my administration who have been a part of this, our HPD Commissioner, Vicki Bean, our Buildings Commissioner, Rick Chandler, our Assistant Commissioner for Health, Nancy Clark. I, of course, want to thank Commissioner Darrell Towns from the State Housing Department, who is an old friend and a colleague, worked for many years together. I want to thank him for joining this effort energetically. The elected officials here today, every one of them, I've known them all a long time. They've all focused on fighting harassment and protecting affordable housing. Borough President Adams and Senator Squadron, Assemblywoman Simon, and, of course, the chair of our Housing Committee, the City Council, Jimani Williams. And more what you see are tenants organizing to stop harassment. And these kind of efforts help tenants organize. You're going to hear from Donna Mossman, of the tenant leader with the Crown Heights Tenant Union. These efforts help put wind in the sails of tenant organizing and give them more ability to follow through on organizing. We found that with our Worst Landlords Watch List when I was public advocate. We shined a light on the bad landlords. It helped tenants to organize and get the attention they deserve and force the changes. Ultimately, that effort led to thousands of units getting repairs that wouldn't have otherwise. We see a lot of changes, and we're proud of the changes we're making here in this city. A new tenant harassment law that increases the penalties for each instance of harassment now to $10,000 per penalty. We obviously announced in the State of the City $36 million in legal assistance in some key neighborhoods where we have to make sure that people are protected. But that number has to expand in lots of different ways. And we need all our partners to be a part of that effort. Look, I just want to put a picture on this before my colleagues come up. What does it mean when someone's harassed? It's illegal, we know that, but what does it mean humanly? It means a family doesn't get heat, a family doesn't get hot water, no repairs. Life becomes impossible. This illustration here is of a building that an unscrupulous landlord started doing quote-unquote repairs on. What he was really trying to do was force the family that still lived there out by having this be the conditions around them every day. And the notion was if he made their lives unacceptable, they would leave, and then he could flip the building and get a lot more money for the units in it. This is what this task force is going to go at. It's going to have the full power of the Attorney General, State Housing Department, a bunch of city agencies, HPD buildings, finance, the Sheriff's Department, the Law Department. All of these pieces make a huge impact. So everyone knows that we are focused in this city on building more affordable housing, on preserving the affordable housing we have with subsidies and other programs, but the legal piece and the enforcement piece is absolutely necessary, or else a lot of those other efforts just won't have the impact they should have. We cannot keep hemorrhaging units that legally still should belong in the hands of the tenants that have them, and this task force is going to make a big difference. Quick couple of sentences in Spanish. Hoy estamos anunciando un nuevo esfuerzo para investigar a caseros que usan tácticas para sacar a inquilinos de apartamentos de renta estabilizada. Estas tácticas son ilegales. La gente debe poder vivir en paz en hogares que puedan pagar. I read that from the written page. Eric Schneiderman could do that. De nada. Eric Schneiderman could do that without the written page. He's that good. But thank you again, Attorney General, Commissioner, everyone, all my colleagues, because this is going to be a game changer.
Muchísimas gracias, Guillermo. And now I'd like to introduce someone who it is really a pleasure to have him here, as well as a critical part of this task force being successful as we go forward. Commissioner Darrell Towns, who has been an advocate for housing and who actually he still does because he's a statewide commissioner, but he represented that old neighborhood where my father lived and knows personally and knows in his bones about this problem better than pretty much anyone else in state government. So it's a pleasure to introduce Commissioner Darrell Towns.
Great. Thank you very much, Attorney General, and good morning, everyone. To our Mayor, Mayor de Blasio, and to my colleagues in government. In 2011, under Governor Cuomo's leadership, New York enacted the strongest protections in decades for rent-regulated tenants. Then in 2012, the governor created the Tenant Protection Unit, ably led by Deputy Commissioner Richard White. The TPU proactively investigates and audits illegal landlord behavior and protects tenants from harassment, overcharges, and fraud. And the TPU is unique. It's the first of its kind for the agency and the state and actually in the country. The TPU is also empowered to make a determination as whether to refer the matters to the Attorney General for criminal prosecution. The TPU, through its audits, has restored more than 37,000 units to rent regulation rolls. And has informed these tenants of their rights under the rent regulation law. And Borough President, you'll be happy to know that a third of those units have been right here in our borough of Brooklyn. That's a net savings. That's a net savings for the state of close to $2 billion, because it would take about $2 billion to otherwise build or preserve those same amounts of units that we have recaptured. So this collaborative task force, this collaboration between city and state government, is to bring joint resources together to protect rent-regulated tenants from landlord harassment. It's about sharing data, sharing resources, sharing information, sharing enforcement strategies, and yes, sharing a common vision. Bringing administrative, civil, and criminal actions and penalties against landlords who are trying to force long-term tenants out of their homes. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the governor today, and we look forward to the tremendous good that we can do in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next, I'd like to introduce Donna Mossman, who is a longtime rent-regulated tenant in Crown Heights. She's a member of the Crown Heights Tenant Union, has experienced the kind of harassment we're talking about firsthand, and I thank her for being here today to share her story with us. Please welcome Donna Mossman.
Let me say, this is great news for tenants. My name is Donna Mossman, and I am one of the founding members of the Crown Heights Tenants Union. Thank you. My mother and I have lived in Crown Heights for 38 years. My mother, who is a retiree, should not have to worry about having a place to live. I want to thank the Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, Mayor Bill de Blasio, and Commissioner Darrell Towns, and all of the housing agencies that are standing here with us today. Thank you for your commitment to tenants. Thank you for joining forces in the fight against landlords who harass tenants in our communities. Thank you, South Brooklyn Legal Services, for hosting this event and for providing legal assistance to tenants in need. Over the last 2 years, I have witnessed predatory landlords pushing working-class families out of their homes and out of their neighborhoods. These tactics are unethical and illegal, and we will not stand by while landlords profit from displacing longstanding tenants from their community. The Crown Heights Tenants Union was formed with the help of UHAB, the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board, to fight for tenants' rights and push back against the predatory landlords and to organize building by building, block by block. Let me share with you some of the stories of suffering that my neighbors and I have experienced or are currently experiencing. Just imagine having no heat and hot water and living in an apartment below and next to an apartment that no longer has windows, floors, ceilings, or walls. It is 10 degrees outside and wind is blowing throughout the building and into your apartment. Tenants have experienced this for a week at a time or more, and 20 days or more during the last winter. And this is even happening now. Landlords have told tenants not to call 311. The Crown Heights Tenants Union mobilized tenants to call 311, and HPD responded. Through the efforts of HPD, the predatory landlord had no choice but to purchase a boiler, and that boiler was placed in a trailer outside the building, providing heat to 2 buildings last winter. HPD worked with the tenants. To HPD, I thank you. Due to destruction and rebuilding of apartments, tenants have experienced or are experiencing the following: collapsed ceilings in every room, cracks along the walls and ceilings, floors shifting due to continuous pounding of the renovation, no running water from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on a daily basis, demolition and rebuilding of apartments 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The noise level is unbearable. Tenants unable to collect their mail due to construction materials blocking the path to the mailbox. Just to leave your apartment or enter and exit your building, you have to navigate around stoves, refrigerator, and debris from the construction being done in the rebuilding of new apartments. Dust in your apartment and the hallways, dust in your closets, on your clothes and shoes. The workers were provided with masks, but not the tenants. The tenants were told to put wet towels at their doors and their windows. Tenants experiencing an infestation of rodents because of the construction and non-removal of garbage. Telephone wires and internet and intercom wires cut. Apartments have mold because repairs from leaks were not fixed in a timely manner. A tenant has mold on a bathroom steam pipe. The mold was not cleaned nor removed, but a wooden box was built around the steam pipe, encasing the mold in the bathroom. That was during the summer. I wonder what has grown since then. Some of these buildings were in such bad shape, they ended up on the AEP list, the Alternative Enforcement Program list, as one of the worst 200 buildings in New York City. Just remember that the construction of these apartments lasts as long as 6 months or more. These predatory landlords must be made to understand they are not housing cattle, they are housing people. In closing, I would like to say thank you for inviting me. Thank you for forming this task force, which is going to provide my neighbors and I with much needed assistance and protection. I can tell you that organizing and working together works. The Crown Heights Tenants Union looks forward to working with this task force in the future. And I want to say you guys are now honorary members of the Crown Heights Tenants Union.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donna, for being here, for all the work you've done, and thank you to all the other advocates who have made this day possible. And in Brooklyn, you're lucky to have people who are not just advocates, but for advocates who also get elected to office. And before we finish, I do want to acknowledge Joanne Simon and Jumani Williams, who are here, who are two such advocates in office. And State Senator Dan Squadron was with us. He had to go. Finally, I'm honored to introduce a warrior. He's an advocate, but I would put him closer to warrior. And it is appropriate that the borough of Brooklyn has as its president someone who is been a great colleague to me and a great force for justice, and is going to be very much at the heart of the work we do in Brooklyn as we move forward with this task force, Eric Adams.
Thank you, AG, for really bringing just an innovative approach to this issue of housing, the same level of innovation he brought as a state senator and now as our attorney general. And the mayor has made it clear from the beginning that ensuring adequate protection for tenants and the right to have a home is at the top of his list, and he's clearly living out what he'd made clear on the campaign trail. The countless number of families he visited and realized that people are afraid of where they will be able to live in the city of New York, and that's unacceptable. During the 90s, drugs and violence was the epicenter. The borough of Brooklyn was the epicenter where much drugs and violence existed. And groups like Donna were organized to rid our communities of crime, of the small numerical minority number of people who were carrying out criminal actions. And we fast forward today, Brooklyn is one of the locations where the displacement of tenants, we are the epicenter. And that energy that took place of ridding our communities of those who wore blue jeans and sold drugs, now they're wearing blue three-piece suits and displacing tenants. And they have participated in the criminal action of taking away homes of innocent people. They have been unindicted co-conspirators, and we're saying today you can no longer hide in the shadows of your actions. We're going to combine all of our energy to identifying and ridding them out. And those who are hearing this announcement may not understand why this is so important. This problem of displacement will end instantly once we start having perp walks of landlords who are carrying out this action, because it would send a message. It would send a message to those colleagues who find it more profitable to displace a family than to prepare and fix the building in an acceptable manner. This is going to send shockwaves throughout the entire community of those slumlords that believe they got away with their actions over and over again. We're also calling for all of our district attorneys in the 5 boroughs to join the AG and join this coalition. They are on the ground and they see firsthand what is taking place. We are hoping that they will join this initiative, that we can ensure that criminal behavior that took place for years is going to be accounted for. The reason this has existed for so long is because we allowed the predatory crimes to be gauges of how safe we are in the city. We were concerned about rape, robbery, and burglary. We were not concerned about the raping of a family when their home is taking place, the robbery of a future when you're denied access to a home, the larceny of your dreams when you wanted to be able to have a house. Now those predatory crimes are not only going to be accounted for by those who prey on innocent people on street corners, but those who prey on innocent people in the street buildings that line our blocks and our communities. Hooray for this action, and we thank the mayor, the AG, and all of our partners for giving our tenants the relief they've been looking for. Hooray for them.
I love it when he does that. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we can take some on-topic questions. If you just identify yourself and your place of employment, if any.
Andrew Siff from WNBC. For yourself or for the mayor himself mentioned that as public advocate, he had a list of bad landlords. There have been initiatives to crack down on delinquent landlords for years, if not decades. Why does this task force change that reality?
Well, I mean, I'll let the mayor respond, but I can start off by saying there has been since I took office 5 years ago, I found that there are problems throughout state and city government with a lack of communication and coordination by agencies that should be working together. We have reached a crisis here in terms of the boom of the housing market that becomes just too tempting for some particularly abusive landlords. And we have worked together on a sort of an ad hoc and anecdotal basis. This task force represents a systemic reform that will ensure the sharing of information, that will encourage others to come forward and tenants come forward. And also, ladies and gentlemen, let me emphasize, good landlords sometimes come forward and good contractors sometimes come forward to report this misconduct. So we're going to open up broader forms of communication. We're going to have seamless cooperation between state, city actors, and it's important also to understand that as in any issue like this, the action on the ground, the activist groups have to be involved also, and this will enable us to do this and speak with one voice and to bring more cases than we brought and to create the deterrent effect that some of my colleagues have spoken about. Your Honor?
Thank you. Look, for too long, unscrupulous landlords have found a way to navigate. If they couldn't get away with something one way, they'd get away with it another way. This is part of what motivated the worst landlords watch list, is we found landlords would rack up all sorts of penalties and housing violations. They would get a good lawyer. They would go into housing court. They would get the dollar figure of their penalties knocked down. They'd treat it as a cost of doing business, and they'd go on not providing heat and hot water and repairs. So it's a tragic, cynical economic equation. We said a long time ago that the way to defeat that cynicism is to surround the bad landlords, to get the penalties increased, which is what we did, for example, the tenant harassment law. We thank the City Council for their leadership on that. It is the combination of the enforcement actions, Attorney General, State Housing Department, the different mayoral agencies. It is the support for legal aid so that a landlord who's doing the wrong thing is now up against a tenant and a lawyer who supports that tenant, not a defenseless tenant. It is supporting the organizing efforts. So bluntly, we are, in a good way, tightening the noose. We are making it tougher and tougher on the bad actors. And this effort will ultimately reach thousands and thousands of tenants, combined with all the other new pieces being put into play. It's going to change the game. And then, as I suspect Commissioner Bean might say, there is a deterrent effect. If you watch your fellow bad actor get caught and penalized and put out in public for all to see, you might think twice about breaking the law. Did you want to add?
Let me just add to that by saying that, one of the problems that we faced in the past is if we got a call from a tenant who was enduring these kinds of conditions, we at HPD or DOB could go in, issue violations, but as the mayor said, that it became just a cost of doing business for some of these landlords. Having our ability to go in, see the violations, issue violations, see what's going on in terms of patterns and combine that with the enforcement power that the Attorney General and the state have is an incredibly powerful combination to make it so expensive, so difficult for landlords to do this and to show tenants that there is relief and there is protection so that they call early so that we can do something early. So it really is a game changer in terms of bringing the power of all these different agencies and all of this different information to bear to protect tenants.
Yes, on topic, once again, yes.
This question is for you. This is Monica Miller from WCBS 880. When you talk about penalties and criminal action, what type of penalties are we talking?
Well, there's a wide range of penalties because there's a wide range of misconduct that we're talking about. But certainly, there are not just misdemeanors, but there are felonies that can be prosecuted. We have had success in actually removing some bad actors who were physically harassing tenants and getting them out of the picture completely. It is possible that people get jail time, but the devious creativity shown by some of these bad actors in this space, landlords and people they hire, and developers and people they hire, has led us to understand that there's a very broad range of both civil and criminal liability, and and whether it's harassment or assault or endangering someone's life through some other process. The New York State has a very, very full set of laws to protect tenants from this kind of conduct. Grace.
Grace Rao from New York. One question for you as well, Mr. Attorney General. You said that when appropriate, your office would be looking to prosecute some of these bad actors. Have you been doing that already? And can you give us a sense of sort of, are these cases particularly difficult to bring or have success with? And how have you approached them in the past? And sort of, do you expect to see an increase in the caseload going forward?
Yes, we have done that, and we've gotten results, and some of it has been made public. I can't comment on ongoing investigations that haven't yet come to fruition, but this task force is just going to help. These are challenging cases. I mean, we often have to send in undercover investigators. A lot of times tenants are afraid to speak up. Another great benefit of this collective effort is I think we're going to have an easier time getting cooperation from people. But we are not deterred by the challenges to bring difficult cases. We will do so. We have done so, and this task force will ensure, in a very concrete way, I'm confident, that the flow of information to Commissioner Towns' office, my office, to the city agencies is just going to get better and better, and the ability to get people to cooperate with investigations is going to get better and better.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes, sir.
And also the fear of criminal prosecution is one thing, but we've also currently at the TPU have also brought landlords into settlement. And I think that also is part of this effort. Landlords who were harassing tenants came around with the TPUs after the TPU's investigation and agreed to settlements in order to reverse those opportunities, paid a hefty fine, and also opened up a path for those harassed tenants to return to their apartments. So I think that this gives us an opportunity. All of us had our laser focus in areas, but by coming together, it allows us to cover more territory. And again, the importance of sharing information, sharing efforts, enforcement techniques makes for us all together sharing in success down the road.
Thank you. Yes.
Yoav Gona with the New York Post. I'm still struggling to identify what's new here besides the collaboration. It seems like a bunch of agencies that already had the power to do these things are just going to do them with renewed focus now. Collaboration. How is this going to make things? How is this a game changer?
Well, let me give you an analogy. President Adams. I know. I enjoy saying that too. Yes. The current President Adams mentioned, drew an analogy to our efforts to fight crime during the crack epidemic, and President Adams and I both worked in law enforcement, and the best way to deal with problems when you had a building that was the center of crime, that there was crack dealing, there was violence, there were things coming out of that building, was what we call the all levers approach. Because you didn't just if you just sent the cops in and arrested a few people, it wouldn't work. You had to fix the street lights. You had to go in and take down the barriers. Department of Buildings was critical. Transportation was critical. Social services to get in there and get the people who were victimized by the drug dealers in the building was critical. This is the equivalent for harassed tenants of that effort. This is the all levers approach to preventing predatory landlords from throwing people out of their homes.
Let me just add one quick point. The speed dynamics are crucial here. If you got a bad actor and they can delay the penalties, as I said in the case of some of the landlords we dealt with the worst landlords watch list, they would just play the clock. They would, delay the court process. They'd knock down the fines with lots of negotiation. This makes it a lot harder for a bad actor to squirm out of the situation because they're surrounded by all these agencies, and it speeds up each agency's work. Each agency now is going to move more quickly because they're sharing information, because they're pushing each other bluntly to move more quickly. And there's the deterrent effect, and I really don't want to have that missed here. If someone thinks they will get caught, they are more likely not to violate the law. Right now, a lot of bad landlords think they will not get caught. Our message today is you will get caught. All of these agencies are going to work together. You will get caught. There will be severe penalties. You're going to wish you had not violated the law.
Okay, thank you. Maybe time for a few more.
On Channel 2. For market rate tenants who don't have the protection of rent regulations and who may also be facing harassment, who can't afford steep rent increases, can this task force help them as well?
Sure. I mean, any illegal conduct towards a tenant, whether rent regulated or not, is something that we would be concerned with. And there are situations, because the market is going up so rapidly, that there are people who it's worth it to some landlords to try and get people who just have leases out so they can just immediately release at a much higher rate. So this is going to cover any tenant who feels that they are being unfairly harassed or abused should get in contact with us. We have multiple lines of communication now. We have our website, ag.ny.gov, and the other agencies here also have. It's very easy to communicate, or call 311. One more?
The mayor just referred to a little bit earlier some of the legal aid services that are available, legal services for tenants. The city council has proposed, some members have proposed a right to counsel in housing court for New Yorkers, and I'm wondering whether you and the mayor think this is something that would be helpful in this endeavor that you're moving forward with, and whether it's something that's feasible.
Well, look, the failure to fund civil legal services in cities and states all over America, I can say as the state's top lawyer, is to me nothing short of a disgrace. It is anti-American, and I think that at the State of the Judiciary speech a few days ago, the Chief Judge of New York State, Judge Lippman, referred to the concept of civil Gideon, referring to the Gideon v. Wainwright decision that required counsel in all criminal cases. I think it's very important that we work there. I know that in some of the settlements that I've obtained with some of the big banks that caused the crash of the housing market, they have put up, I think we now are at $100,000 for legal services around the state of New York to deal with the victims of the crash. So the key issue here really is the funding, and that's something that we are grappling with and we're dealing with. The mayor has committed to a substantial increase in funding. I think this wonderful agency is actually going to go through some expansion, so maybe you could comment on that.
Yeah, I think, look, I think the fact is that a lot of tenants, had they had legal representation, would have kept their apartments. It's as simple as that. That's not to say that every tenant is perfect. It's not to say that sometimes, even with legal representation, the landlord might not have been found to be right. But we know in thousands and thousands of cases, the tenant would have gotten to keep their apartment legally and appropriately. That's why we're going to focus a lot more of our attention on the legal services part of this equation. I think we need all other levels of government to do the same. I think it's something we need to do in concert. It's one of the most powerful tools we have. Mr. Attorney General, I know you said that you were going to end questioning, but I just want to, I saw Bridget Bergen had her hand up, and since she has just gotten engaged, I think, first of all, we applaud you and congratulate you. But I think she should get a free question for having taken such a bold step.
Bonus, yes, the bonus. Now we're reaching the bonus question.
Bonus round.
Oh, and one of my assistants has advised me that I misspoke because the numbers are hard to keep track of. We have thus far in my office over the last 2 years forced the banks to provide $100 million for legal services around the states, and we are funding 90 agencies, including here in Brooklyn. Yes. You know what they say. You know it's cool? Billions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The question is really to you and to the Attorney General, but I'm still trying to understand what this task force really means for tenants today in terms of how they access the system. Clearly, you're talking a lot about the communication, coordination on the government side, but as a tenant who may not be as lucky to have Donna as their advocate, you know, what do they do to access what they need, whether it's through HPD or the state? And how is this task force part of that?
Yeah, so I just want to start on the basic. I'm glad you asked. So that anyone who thinks they're being harassed and wants to get the city government involved or the state government involved can call 311 and get directed from there. Again, obviously, we want to make sure people get legal representation wherever possible, but we have direct enforcement actions that this task force will be undertaken that, if reported, we can act on. So, again, if you see this as a way of speeding up enforcement, getting enforcement to happen from as many different places as it can. Look at the city level alone. We're talking about HPD, buildings, finance, sheriff. You know, there's a lot of different pieces that can help surround the situation and force the hand of the bad landlord. But people should call 311 to report any instance that they believe to be harassment. You want to add something?
Additionally, the state has the Office of Rent Administration, which also is available for those complaints, whether through our walk-in centers or the like. But I think this collaborative is also intended on being proactive. Sometimes tenants are being wronged and they're not even aware of it. So by coming together, we can actually produce opportunities of coming to the tenant as opposed to just waiting to receive the complaint.
Yes, no, go ahead.
Let me just add on one.
Just a second.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Let me help you out here.
Thank you. Let me just add one thing on that, Commissioner Towns, because that's so important. I mean, this building here was actually identified through data analysis of us all sharing data, looking at it to find suspicious patterns, to see buildings that had recently turned hands, to see where DOB was getting building permit applications, but we had some reason to believe, because we were getting 311 complaints, that there were still tenants in that building. This is one where we hadn't yet gotten a call. It was our data analysis that showed us there's something going on here that caused us to send inspectors in, joint inspection forces, and then to take action. So it's so important not to realize that it's not only complaints, but it's this proactive enforcement that where we're working together to analyze patterns and to identify and be proactive about the enforcement.
Thank you. Let me just mention one thing that has already started to happen that gives you an idea of the potential here. Instead of having a bunch of different agencies sending in investigators to do inspections, we now are starting to conduct joint inspections. And that means, as the mayor said, the speed with which matters will be dealt with is something that is very important to this process. We have in our office gone after, and the Triborough case was one, huge property owners who have systematically tried to rid their buildings of tenants. We have gone after folks who were actually hired thugs, hired by landlords who are trying to get rid of tenants by a personal harassment, discrimination against immigrants, against people who pay for part of their rent with the government check, against senior citizens. I mean, we're talking about situations in which there are a whole host of laws that are implicated, and we have been bringing those actions. We now will be able to do it more efficiently, more effectively, and we will be able to deal with this. But ladies and gentlemen, it is very important to understand the level of the conduct that's going on. The market is moving so fast that the unscrupulous cannot help but be tempted into things they might not even think of in a slower market. But when you have people hiring armed thugs to harass tenants, you know we're in a pretty serious situation. So these are the things that we can get done much more effectively together, and I'm confident that we will see each other again at some point when we are announcing some of these cases. But I cannot emphasize enough that the assumption that government agencies are always coordinating effectively together is often false. And it's very, there was no system, believe it or not, for New York and surrounding states for law enforcement to share information systematically about heroin rings that dealt in both states. I set up a joint heroin task force with several surrounding states in the last year. First time that happened, everyone assumes we're doing it. This is a tremendous effort, and it's a tremendous potential. So I want to again thank all my colleagues. And, Your Honor, you want to close?
Do you want to follow on this before we go
Yes.
off topic? Go ahead.
311 complaints be filed and directed differently. What happens to those
And how it will
taking the
be
complaint?
shared with the other agencies?
Yes, so when someone calls in a 311 complaint, that will go to the city agency that is most touches that, and then the city agency will alert everyone else who's involved as appropriate, right? Sometimes we will be calling in for joint inspections. Sometimes we will be referring for criminal prosecution. Sometimes we'll just be sharing information and saying, you know, what else do you know? But the city agencies will take any of that information from 311, work together to direct it out and to bring in the right people on that.